Hello, everyone. Welcome to Progress Junior Golf with Live Sport Now and England Golf Young Ambassadors. My name's Steve Jackson, and this is Ian Waterhouse.
Hello, Steve Jackson. How are you? It's good to see you again. Episode 33, Steve. Wow.
Absolutely. We're approaching that half century. We're going to be there before the end of the golf season, I think. Still a little way to go, mind you. So we might well have killed each other by then.
Well, we've done over a year now of this. So
absolutely, yes. We're doing very well. You're right. Now, number 33. Now, if you remember, a fortnight ago, the last podcast, we looked at junior coaching as our subject. And in particular, we looked at coaching of younger junior golfers. Well, today, we're going to stay with junior coaching, but we're going to look at the older junior golfers. So let's say from perhaps 12 onwards. So the teenage years, if you like. So we've got three guests on the show this evening, all pre-recorded interviews. So we've got PGA Pro Phil Akers. He was on the last podcast talking about coaching young juniors. Well, we'll get his take as well on the transition from coaching young golfers to the slightly older junior golfers, and in particular, the prospect of changing coaches when you do that as well. And we're also going to hear from England Golf Young Ambassador Daniel Robson, and also very special guest, very special one for us today, because as you well know, Ian, on this podcast, we've had Siam Cup stars Charlie Hull, Georgia Hall, and Bronte Law on the show in the past. Tonight, we've got our first former Ryder Cup player. So drum roll, please.
I know who it is. Alex says it across the bottom, but
yeah,
drum roll.
The giveaway. Yeah, okay. Quick say
it says it in the text of this broadcast as well. So if you don't know it by now.
Yeah, he played in the 1991 Ryder Cup, and earlier today I chatted with Paul Broadhurst. Actually, during that Ryder Cup, I was having a quick look at his stats in that Ryder Cup. If you remember, it was the one at Kiwa Island, the War on the Shore. He actually only played 2 matches during that Ryder Cup and won both of them. So well done to him. There aren't going to be many players out there who've got a 100% record in the Ryder Cup. But it was fantastic.
I was 6 years old then, Steve, so I don't quite remember it.
Okay. I do, which mind you, it was my birthday last week. So if you of course you remember, I was 21 again last week.
Yeah,
a couple of weeks ago.
I did say happy birthday. I sang it to you as well, didn't I? Actually.
Yeah, it was horrific, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, I chatted with Paul Broadhurst earlier today. It was fantastic talking to him. He was doing a junior open at the club where we first started playing the game. So it's fascinating talking to him at his home club, which was Atherstone Golf Club in Warwickshire. So really good to hear his views on this subject as well. So we're going to be touching about that. Got a lot to cover then. So let's get on with the junior golf news. First things first, it's the junior golf news. As we well know, Ian, start of the golf season is officially the US Masters, and it did take place last week. Of course, John Rahm won the competition. British amateur champion, who's a teenager, Aldrich Podgaita, from South Africa. Unfortunately, he missed the cut, but well done to him for playing in that event. Now, of course, before that, playing at Augusta, it was the Augusta National Women's Amateur Championship, and I'm pleased to say that friend of the podcast, Lottie Woad, made it through to that final round. So it was 2 rounds, and then you made it through to that final round. She eventually finished 13th, which is fantastic. I think she was the top British player to finish. In fact, she was the top British player because the other British players, Kaylee McGinty finished 20th, Charlotte Heath finished 25th. The other 3, Jess Baker, Hannah Darling, and Amelia Williamson, they all missed the cut. Well done to them. Staying overseas then, French Boys Championship, that took place at Le Golf National, which of course is a Ryder Cup venue. Scottish international Conor Graham finished runner-up. It was 3rd in qualifying, then got through to knockout stages, did really well, made it through all the way through to the final, lost to home player Louis Anser on the 36-hole final, and he went to the 3rd extra hole. So wow, that must have been some match they were involved in there, but unfortunately he lost on the 3rd extra hole there. But well done to him. Fowler Series, the Junior Tour started. First event took place at Brocket. We've got a photo of the winner, Paul Collington from Gog Magog. He says. I sent it to you earlier. There he is. Thank you.
There he is. Hey. Hey,
and actually credit to him as well, because and this is no joke. I took photos of every single one on the day. He was the only one wearing a Faldo shirt, so well done wearing the shirt, wearing the cap on the first day, and then goes on and win the tournament. So scores the 71, 73, and 71 by 2 shots from Henry Lindley. Third place was Monty Holcomb and Ronnie Groves. R&A Student Tour Series that had their final took place up in Scotland at St Andrews. Cumbria's Will Coxon won by 4 shots, 20-year-old from the University of Stirling, finished clear of Order of Merit champion Ryan Griffin, Tom Parker and Jack Levisage. The Girls' Championship was won by Scottish International Lorna McClymont, who won this as well last year. So 2 years on the top that she's won this competition, so well done to her. Berkhamsted Trophy, that took place, and that was won by Staffordshire James Claridge, 20-year-old. Shot scores of 67, 66, 69 to finish 3 ahead of Jack Little, who started with a 64. Fantastic first round for Jack. And Jake Plum was the further shot back in 3rd position. Over in Ireland, they had the Royal Portrush Scratch Cups. The Ian Bamford men's competition was won by Sean Keeley, 67-71, won by 1 shot. The Zara Bolton women's competition was won by Emma Fleming. Now, a name which has cropped up on this podcast on a few occasions, including the last podcast, is Harriet Lockley. She won the Cowboy Scratch, you might remember, a couple of weeks ago at Delamere Forest. Well, she's only won another competition. She's won the Leverett Trophy at Formby Labies, so congratulations to her. And also a big shout out to a couple of people who've been on this podcast as well, because they've won competitions in the last few weeks or so. Anna Dawson, you remember, who appeared on the show where we covered the Faldo series. She won the Roehampstead Ladies 94th competition, the Gold Challenge Trophy from the Isle of Man. So well done to her. I think that's amateurs and professionals, because I know that she's turned professional. So amateurs and professionals in that event. And also a big shout out as well to, if you remember all the way back, that very first podcast where we had guests on. The first 2 was me and you. The first one we had guests on, Bailey Pike. If you remember Bailey?
Yeah, no, Bailey.
We did it.
Well. Yep.
We did it. We did the show was on college golf in the US. Well, her mum contacted me this week to say that she's won her first competition over in the States.
Brilliant.
So congratulations to Bailey on winning her first.
Isn't it nice, Steve, hearing stuff like that now? You know,
Absolutely.
I've been involved in golf and sort of started in junior golf with the Faldo series really from sort of 2020 really, and now you're starting to hear this, like Harriet Lockley. She won the Faldo Series Wales Championship, the first ever Faldo Series event we did. And not only did she win her age category, she won outright. And she was under 16 girls category, I think, at that point as well, beating the under 21 boys, by the way.
Yes.
So fair play.
Takes some doing. Yeah, you're right. It is great to hear some of these stories of people we've met and seen them grow up, kind of thing, and go on to bigger better. Just finally, then, Junior Tour Scotland, they came on the podcast as well. They had their first event of the year at Goldsbury and Royal Dawn. The boys' winner was Finley Galloway. Girls' winner was Summer Elliott. And I mentioned as well that the Scottish Boys and Girls Championship started today. It's a 3-day competition. Well, obviously, I can tell you that I think I had a quick look at the scores. I think the leader of the boys' competition was a 500 par round. So obviously, really good scoring to start off with that tournament. Obviously, we'll cover the news on that in the next podcast. That wraps up the news. Apart from, you have something to tell me.
Yeah, I've got a couple of bits. It's not junior golf related, but you know we do have to use this platform to plug ourselves a little bit too, don't we? Just quickly, by the way, if you are watching this podcast and do want to get involved, we do want to hear from you. This is your show as well. We are here to talk about the subjects and things that you want to talk about. So do drop us a message below wherever you're watching this: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn. Comment. We can see them. Steve and I do go back and check them out. So if you've got a question for us, or for somebody perhaps more in the know, or even have a suggestion for a podcast topic, we do want to hear it from you. But quickly, 2 things. Actually, this Monday, live golf is back. We were due to be on the course, of course, for the Sunnydale Foursomes, but it got cancelled off. However, if you fancy watching a bit of pro golf for free, we are broadcasting live this Monday at Moortown Golf Club, the ITS Tour, formerly the 2020 Pro Tour, but it's now ITS Tour due to sponsorship purposes, is back live. Moortown Golf Club, look at that. A minimum prize fund, Steve, of £10,000. It kind of makes live golf look a bit paltry, doesn't it? Really?
Hey, I'd settle for 10,000. Don't worry about that.
Well, I'll tell you something, 2020 Pro Tour, or ITS Tour as it's called now, we see a lot of junior golfers have played in that. We interviewed Oliver Caton, didn't we, at Sunnydale the other week, where he's won on that tour. So these are the types of tours that you get pros. In fact, Paul Broadhurst, talking of Paul, has played on the ITS 2020 Pro Tour. I interviewed him, so it's well worth tuning in to watch. It's live this Monday at Moortown, live sport now. On YouTube, there is a link in the body of this broadcast. And of course, we've mentioned it before, we are going to be bringing you the Trilby Tour in 2023 as well. But here are the dates for you. So we're off up to Scotland twice this year. 12th of June, we're going up there, Yorkshire, Kilnwick, Percy, which is just outside York, on the 10th of July, Oxfordshire, the Springs, which is nice and local, on the 17th of July, and of course, grand final back at Dundonald on the 25th of September. Each and every single one of those is live and free to air at Live Sport now on YouTube. Steve, back to you.
Right. So we're on to the podcast then. So like I say, we've got pre-recorded interviews. So we've just been me and Ian playing the interviews and then have a bit of a chat afterwards. So we'll get first on England Golf Young Ambassador Daniel Robson is going to be coming on. PGA Pro Phil Akers, and as we mentioned, former Ryder Cup player and two-time seniors major winner as well, we have to say as well, and a multiple winner on the European Tour as well. A few years ago, Paul Broadhurst is coming on. Let's start with Daniel then, because we're obviously going to be talking about junior coaching. So let's find out, when did Daniel then first start playing the game of golf?
I started when I was 5 years old, and I didn't really properly start till I was about 10, really.
Okay. And when did you actually receive coaching?
Technically, when I was like 5 years old, really.
Okay. So obviously you were very young golfer when you started getting coaching. You say you didn't really start playing until you were 10 years old. So what changed when you were 10 then?
That was like more competitions and all that. So that's when I started getting involved. You know what I mean?
When did you start receiving one-to-one coaching?
That would have been around the same time, about 10, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
10, maybe like 12, maybe, when I got a bit more experience, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So who was that with, and what form did that take at that stage?
I was with, I believe the first one was with Keith Bond at Chesterfield Downs, and then it kind of changed because he ended up leaving. So it ended up being in the form of I'd go have a one-on-one and have a look at my swing and all that, and it just go through what was wrong and all that, anything that needed to improve. If it was close to a competition, he would maybe just do little improvements, if you know what I mean, rather than doing big ones and then do big ones during the winter.
Yeah. And obviously at that age, how much were you beginning to take it in what they were saying? Presumably when you first started out, when you were very young, it was a little bit, you probably didn't understand too much of it. Yeah,
that's why when it was about 10, I started having them, because I understood more with this individual and I started to progress even more.
And how did they do that? Can you almost work it out, look back now and think, how did they get me to understand it? Because obviously it isn't easy at that age for you to, not just you in particular, but for juniors to pick up on the technicalities of golf.
Well, for me, when I got told to do anything, I did it because I have dyslexia and all that. So I'm really down, you know what I mean? So when they did it, they'd demonstrate to me what to do. And then like when I'm trying to swing, they'd almost show me my swing. So like making me feel the movement so I know what it feels like. So when I hit it, I knew I did it right. So it wasn't just them saying I did it right. I knew when I did it right because I could feel it.
Okay. And what role did the coaches, so that was when you were 10. I mean, as you grew older, what kind of handicap were you at that age, and how did that develop?
Well, I was very high. I was given a very high handicap when I was younger, and that did help me a lot. I think build confidence, and it helped me give me an advantage on others. But now I'm a bit lower. It's the opposite for me. I don't feel like I'm at an advantage, if you know what I mean. But yeah, now I just feel like with my coach, I think it's still the same way, but it's more technical and all that. So it's not just him showing me what to do. He's also explaining the future and all that. So, and
obviously there are very, very various different aspects of golf coaching in different parts of the game. Is for you. Let's look at it from the different parts. Then, as far as driving the ball is concerned, when did you start getting a little bit more technical with something as difficult as that?
Well, driving, that definitely came when I was about 12 a bit later on, because at that point I was just swinging and hitting, if you know what I mean, for the driver, because that's all you really can do at that age, if you know what I mean. But it started to get really more technical about 12 properly, because when I was younger it just started going straight, so just left it, if you know what I mean.
I mean, at that age, did you, for example, did you appreciate what a draw was, or a fade, or to you, was it just went left or right?
Yeah, for me at that age, but I know nowadays they're trying to get youngers to know it, but at that age no one told me really much about it. Like, they'd mention it, but they wouldn't say what it was, if you know what I mean.
And presumably at that age you wouldn't necessarily know why it drew, or why it hooked, or why it faded. So when did you start? When did the coach start working with you with that, and actually say, actually, you can hit this shot properly, and you can hit it and deliberately do it that way?
I think it was about 15, because I ended up going with, and I had a new coach because my other one retired, and then that's when it all got introduced, if you know what I mean, about 15, like 14, 15, I believe. And that's when it helped me, you know what I mean, a lot to improve my game.
Okay, so that's obviously. What about things like the short game then? When did that start? Because obviously there were lots of different types of shots that you can hit as a short game. You know, when did you start having to develop that as within the coaching?
I think it probably would be the same, but like it started getting more technical, I think a bit earlier, maybe about like 13, because that's when I started to realise I can't, you know what I mean, just chip and hope. I've got to, you know, do distances, I've got to hit different shots. And that's kind of when I was testing for myself. And then about 14, 15 is when my coach started to bring in more different techniques, different ways of trying to get it on the green, if you know what I mean. We've done some interviews with coaches in the past on this podcast, and they've said that one of the things which kids love to do is they just love to hit the ball in the air. They just love, you know, and every chip around the green is almost like get the lob wedge out and just try and hit it in the air, whereby actually the technical side of it is the fact that might not be the best option for you. When did you start learning those types of things? Properly, I think I started using different clubs, because I still use a lob wedge a lot now, and I get told off for that. But I think properly I started using different clubs about 13. So it wasn't like 14, 15. It was more like 13, because I knew one would roll more, but I just pulled out the same club still. But then, you know what I mean, it was just that progression of the, you know, using different clubs, and yeah, that's where I kind of got a bit carried away. And
I mean, you joke there, the fact that even now you probably still use it a little bit too much now. So it's an ongoing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about other shots? What about other technical shots? Let's think about, let's say, for a bunker shot, for example. When did you first learn how to play a bunker shot?
Honestly, I don't think I ever got told how to hit bunker shot until I was about 15, and so I just learned off telly, really, watching it, how they did it. So
and okay, so that's interesting, the fact that you know some of the shots that you learn without actually having a physical lesson about that. Then, so what did you learn from watching on the television then?
Well, what were the bunker shots?
Yeah.
Well, I'd always watch and see how they'd set up and all that, and whether they were all the same or if they did something different, because you don't want to start doing someone who's different that does like that, because they do it because they're swinging. You want to kind of go with someone who's, how do I say this, like who hits it like textbook style, if you know what I mean. But at the time I was just looking to see the consistency, so that's how I kind of found out, looking and, you know what I mean, going through the video slowly and pausing.
What about something like, let's say, and this has happened many times, I'm sure, in around a goal for you, you get a plug line in a bunker.
Oh, yeah.
Now that's obviously different from hitting just a normal bunker shot. So when did you start learning? Obviously you might have watched that on television, but you wouldn't necessarily know the technicalities of how they hit that shot. So how did the coaching help with that?
That would have been like 16 when I properly got into that, and that's when they started to really introduce like the more different opens and all that, like to help really get out unplugged.
So that's England Golf Young Ambassador Daniel Robson talking about how he got into the game and the age. I mean, he started very young at the age of 6, but didn't really start getting coaching until he was around about 10 years old. And that's is that, I mean, in your experience, is that a norm? I expected probably he might have had a bit more coaching when he was younger.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be younger. Actually, what surprised me as well was when he said he didn't actually get any coaching of getting out of the bunker till he was about 15. I mean,
Yes.
that's surprising, isn't it? I mean, the only problem, I've had plenty of people trying to teach me how to get out of the bunker. The first person to do it was my old man, and the problem is, although he's all right, he's a steady golfer. You know, he was a 15 handicap back in the day, so he's a 15 handicap, the right person to be teaching you the way of getting out of the bunker when 10 shots they're probably going to muck up 2 or 3 of them themselves. So that was a surprise. Obviously quite late to the game, but clearly talented though.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, fascinated. We're going to hear an interview now with Paul Broadhurst, because it's even more strange. This surprised me. We'll certainly hear this, and we'll talk about it afterwards. But when did he first receive coaching? This is fascinating. Here's what Paul had to say earlier today.
Junior coaching, I started when Warwickshire juniors went to Frank Miller at Robin Hood Golf Club in, I guess it was about 1981. I was 16. I was captain of the junior team, and we went there for every month through the summer. And then Frank took me aside after one lesson. I think it was about 12 of us in the team. Took me aside and said, "I'd like to coach you permanently on a full-time basis. Don't want any money or anything." So took the opportunity, and I was with him for 14 years. Did Ryder Cup with him. God rest his soul now. He passed a few years ago, but he got me. He ironed out a lot of my faults. As a kid, we just never really had any lessons up until 16. Had a really strong left-hand grip, and we made the decision early to change that, and fortunately it's all worked out pretty good.
That's unusual, isn't it? The fact that you were quite late to get coaching. That's even, particularly someone who's gone on to that level as well.
Yeah, I guess so. I've been at Atherstone Golf Club all my life. Obviously I don't play that often nowadays, but I just don't have time. But back then I used to live up here, and it's been a breeding ground for some good players over the years. But yeah, I guess there was no professional at the club at the time, no real practice area, so it was difficult to practice and stuff back then, and with no pro then, you just did it myself. But like I said, once I went to see Frank, he sorted my left hand grip out. It's quite funny because for 3 or 4 months I was off 2 handicap at the time, and I couldn't break 80. With a new grip everything was going way right, but we stuck with it, and what happened in the past is history now. Obviously I've had a pretty good career, and my grip's not as bad as it used to be.
So when you were 16 then, so that change whereby obviously suddenly you started having more technical coaching coming your way. How difficult was it as a 16-year-old to appreciate that, to learn that, and because it would have been new, wouldn't it?
It was all new, but I was 16. I think kids adapt pretty quickly to that. You get to 26, 27, 30 years of age, and I think it's probably a little bit too late certainly to make a big change like your grip. But kids adapt well, I think. They take everything on board like a sponge. They just soak it up, and I guess I was similar. But it was. It wasn't all plain sailing. There was a lot of, not, I wouldn't say sleepless nights, but making changes at this game's difficult. But kids seem to grasp it pretty quickly.
And earlier than that, when you were perhaps 12, 13, 14, 15, obviously without the coaching, do you almost coach yourself, or
yeah.
How did you do
that?
My
dad wasn't a especially good golfer. He was sort of high single figures. But he was my sort of mentor back then. I used to play, when I started out, I used to play the municipal courses around Birmingham as a 9-10-year-old, and joined Atherstone when I was about 11 and a half. My dad was my mentor back then. I used to just come up to the golf club and just play and practice, and there's a very small area out on the course where I could perhaps hit wedges and 9-irons. I used to do an awful lot of that, and then come up late at night when the members weren't around and sneak a few chip shots around the greens. strictly against what I should be doing, but back then, you used to have to do that. But no, I had some great times as a kid playing up here. I remember ringing the green staff when in the middle of the winter when there's snow on the ground. Can I sweep some of the temporary greens so I've got something to hit to? The greenkeeper used to say, "Yeah, if you're stupid enough to do it, you carry on." So, but yeah, we had some good times.
I suppose you, as a junior, for someone who obviously wants, well, I don't know, you tell me, when did you want to become a professional golfer yourself?
About 14.
Yeah. So I suppose you needed a club like that to be able to give you the access and be able to, motivate you. And
I mean, I won the Warwickshire under 14s, I think it was the Warwickshire under 15s at North Warwickshire Golf Club.
Under 14s, yeah.
I won it as a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old. I won it 2 years running, and I think that was perhaps the biggest tournament I'd won at that stage. That got me into the Warwickshire Junior setup as a 14-year-old. And I was playing number 12 singles, and I was a decent player then. I was a 5 handicap, so I used to win quite a lot of matches at number 12 in the singles. But that's really got me sort of interested in perhaps taking it further than a hobby, or just a hobby. From 14 onwards, I finished all school sports, just solely to concentrate on golf. I didn't want to go and play football as a 14-year-old after school. I wanted to come straight to the golf club. I remember telling my schoolmaster, or my PE teacher, don't pick me for any school team sports from now on. I'm going to play golf. And his reaction was, "Golf? You'll never make it at golf." Funny story. Since those days, I've actually been back to the school and met him, and I reminded him what he said, and he sort of apologised and said he was wrong to say that. And you can't tell a 14-year-old he's not going to do, he's not going to make it at golf. Chances are he's not, but you don't tell them that. You got to encourage the guys.
Is it almost like, I don't suppose he did it deliberately, but in reverse psychology, did you think, I'm going to prove you wrong?
Maybe.
You remember? I mean, you remember?
Yeah, I did. I remembered it because as a 16, 17-year-old in sixth form, we entered the Aer Lingus Schools Championship, and he was the teacher that got the day off to take us and the minibus. We actually won the Midland region, and we got to the English finals, and we finished second. So all of a sudden, he took a bit of interest in golf, and then I left. And 6, 7, 8 years later, Steve Webster, golf professional in the European Tour for many years, again a member of Atherstone Golf Club, he was playing in the same tournament, the Aer Lingus Schools tournament, representing Atherstone High School. And I just happened to be injured at the time, so I went along to watch, and it was the same school teacher. And that's when I pulled him aside and said, "Do you remember us doing well on this? And you were telling me that I'd never make it at golf." I'd made it. I was on the European tour and I'd won my first tournament. So he had to eat a little bit of humble pie, really. But
Yeah, lovely story there about how it was like saying about to your teacher, "Told you so," kind of thing. But fascinating though, right away at the start of the interview, didn't really start getting any coaching until he was 16, and and you just think to yourself, and that's someone who's gone on to become the very, very top level of the game. I mean, that is very unusual.
I think so. I also think, though, Steve, times have changed a little bit now, though, haven't they? I mean, he was saying that was in the early 80s, wasn't it? And by the way, I've never been up to Atherstone before, but Atherstone Golf Club, fair play to them, because it sounds like even back then it was, the course is yours, basically, Paul. Go ahead and do whatever you need to do, really, to make it. So fair play. They sound like a very open club, to be fair, very supportive. So I know I've been to Atherstone, but I've never been to the golf club. So fair play there. But yeah, I think things are different nowadays, isn't it? It's almost like in football, we talk about Jamie Vardy, of course, who's won the Premier League and he came from non-league, and it doesn't happen very often. And now it's unlikely you're going to get somebody who hasn't been coached until they're 15, 16 suddenly coming through. I mean, John Rahm, when he made it, was almost 16 years old. Rory McIlroy was almost 16. They've been coached for years and years and years before then. And I just think things are a little bit different now. I think that story is going to become more and more rare, if almost non-existent now. I think if you're 15 and are a good player but aren't being coached, it's going to be difficult to make it, but not impossible. It never is.
But you're right. But I mean, we will talk a little bit about trying to find the right environment for golf clubs as well. But the environment there was perfect for him, like you say. It was open. They let him go out on the golf course, and muck about and be a kid at the same time as learning to play the game as well. Now we'll just stay with that topic. We'll bring Brett Daniel back in, young ambassador Daniel Robson, and have a chat with him. And obviously, he's a teenager at the moment, and as we well know, Ian, teenagers can be a little bit awkward. So I posed the question to him.
I never was.
Well, of course not. No, 99.9% of them are then, with the 0.1% exception sat here alongside me here. Yeah. But the question I asked to Daniel was, if you're a PGA pro, how would you coach a teenager? This is what he had to say.
I know normally they just they don't want to get involved at the start to get angry, but they just let them have a couple of minutes just to kind of calm down. And because if you try and, approach someone, you're just going to end up making it worse, I think. So then they end up making them just stay out for a couple of minutes just to calm down, and then letting them come back within the group so it doesn't affect everyone. And hopefully you agree with me with a lot of the coaches have said that sometimes it's the best way of doing it is to let you make the mistakes, and you almost realize to yourself, almost you then go back to the coach and say, why did I make that mistake? Is that something which you've learnt yourself, in the sense of I feel better when I have to ask the pro as opposed to the pro telling me? Yeah, because it's like one of those things where if you've already know what, how do I say it? If you've been taught something, it's one of those things where if you keep making the mistake, then you'll realize that you're doing the mistake and what you need to improve on. I think it's one of those things, if you have never done it before and you don't know what you've done, that's when a coach should jump in, if you know what I mean.
And techniques, let's pick up another part of the game then, putting, because putting, when it comes down to it, is the shot you're going to hit more often than any other shot on a golf course. So it's perhaps the most important as well. Is how did that coaching develop over the years, in the sense of when you were young? Was it just a case of just went up there and hit it, and then suddenly green reading and things like that? How did that develop over the years?
Well, I kind of started off with just, putting it, obviously, just trying to hit it. And then, because my putting's a bit awful at the moment, they kind of tried, when I was about, I think it was like 12, they tried to get me into this reading thing, and I just couldn't do it. With my dyslexia, I just couldn't deal with how they were telling me to. And then my coach was finding different ways, trying to, get me to find out different ways of how to read the putts, distance, and all that. And one of those things where I still don't find a perfect way to putt, if you know what I mean, sometimes. And
when you look, you mentioned earlier about the fact that you watch on television, you see, the pros, and you learn from the way that they do things. When you see the pros doing aim point and things like that, is that something whereby you've tried yourself?
I've definitely been, someone, that's the aim point, was what they tried to get me to do, and I just couldn't do it. So that was one that kind of went out the window on trying to get the putting. So
okay, let's talk about something slightly different then. What we'll talk about coaching. When you're coached, and you mentioned it as well, competitions. How important a role was that as part of your coaching as you were growing up? How many competitions do you play in, and how much of a difference was there, or how much competitions as opposed to how much practice and coaching did you have?
It's one of those where I think playing in competitions were a lot, because I used to play in futures to I-Tour and at my home club and all that. So there were definitely a lot of them, and just trying to do them was great. You know what I mean? It's a good experience for everyone to do, and you know what I mean? It helps you to improve your game more, because doing it on a driving range is one thing, but doing it on a course is another. So it just helps gain that.
And did your coach ever go along and watch you in these competitions, and by doing that get a better idea about how you actually transfer the coaching onto the golf course?
He didn't go to the competitions, but he definitely did. So with the group lessons, he goes on the course as well, and during the summer, which is good.
So obviously so as part of the coaching, he had the opportunity to see you in actually hitting shots under pressure. And how did he or she, whatever coaches you have, work with you, and how did you learn from the interaction of that part of the coaching process?
I don't know. I think it's just one of those where then they know what you're doing, and it's one of those things whether you do it or not. I think because it's all right doing it in the driving range, but you just need to be able to do it on the course. You know what I mean? And the coach will be able to explain why you're doing it wrong on the course rather than why you're doing it wrong in the driving range. And it's just a different feeling because if you can hit it well on the course, then and you can't hit it well in the driving range, then it's just better in a way, if you know what I mean. Because hitting it on the course is just better because you know what I mean. You play in competitions there, it just helps you improve your game a lot more rather than being good in the driving range.
And what handicap are you now?
2.
2. Okay, so you've obviously got to a very good standard then. So as your handicap was coming down, how did the coaching change? Let's say for when you first became a single figure handicapper, how did that coaching change? Was it gradual, or did it feel as if suddenly it had to step up because you were getting a better player?
It was coming down gradual. I think it was gradual because my handicap came down gradually. It was one of those, I think it became more technical than the Sains and all that. So with like biomechanics and talking about all that stuff to try and because I'm trying to do PGA, it helped with that as well. So I managed to, he taught to me on why I'm doing it and how you can improve things and what the first things would be when you're hitting your shot. So for example, if I was hitting it left, always look at the swing and all that. Don't look at, so when someone's hitting the ball, you always look at what the direction it is and it will help you to figure out what's wrong before you look at the swing and stuff like that.
What about equipment as well? Because obviously, as you were getting better, presumably you were thinking, I need to have better equipment, and how much role did your coach play in making sure that you did have better equipment or more appropriate equipment, shall we say?
Well, I think it was one of those things where once I got singled, we knew when I needed new equipment. But I think back in the day, my coach was one of the main people who could see whether I couldn't get enough of it as well, and did cost a fortune.
And what about the actual golf club you were at as well? Was there a feeling of to become a better player, you almost had to move on to well, I don't want to use the phrase better golf club, but you know what I'm saying? Perhaps a more difficult. That's it, a bigger golf club. Was there pressure in that sense of the fact that you felt you might have to move on to somewhere else?
I don't know, because for me, I did end up moving. I think I have like 2 other courses now. One that I've left. One was Woburn, to help with the just challenging courses and all that. And I got given free membership at Brockett, so I use that as well now. So
I was there last week actually, covering the Fowler Series event, so I know exactly which. So obviously 2 golf courses there as well, 3 golf courses at Woburn. So how much development did you learn from that, playing different golf courses and different, not just different golf courses, but difficult golf courses as well? How much did you learn from that as you were growing up?
Yeah, I learned a lot, especially through Woburn, because as I don't know if you know, it's got a lot of trees, especially with the Duchess, and I think that was one of my favourite courses, just because it was just so tight. Just helped you to hit it more straight, because if you're not hitting it straight, you're not going to have a good day on that course.
Now, obviously, you got to single figure handicapper, 2 handicapper. You say you're doing your PGA coaching as well. PGA at the moment, is that correct? Yeah. So as you were going through and going through the age groups, presumably were you involved with the county setup as well? Were you part of the county boys team as you were growing up?
No, I don't think I made it into that at all, which was a bit annoying. But I did do, as I said, Futures and iTour. But when I grew older, you couldn't do that. Then all the other elite stuff I just couldn't get into. So.
Do you feel as if you missed that a little bit then, or do you think that might have helped you in the sense that perhaps there was too many voices if you had a county coach and as well as your club coaches, then that might have helped you in some ways?
I think, I did miss out, but I think that would have just been too much pressure, especially with playing competitions all, everywhere. And, it just would have been too much, I reckon. You don't want to overload someone, or else that will just cause them to have a massive meltdown.
So that's Daniel obviously talking about his experience of the coaching he received as he was growing up. I will come back to you, Ian, but I just want to play the next part of the interview because he talked specifically, he mentioned it there about his dyslexia and how that part was part of his coaching as well and the things that he had to deal with. I raised the question to him, did he know that he had dyslexia before he started playing golf? And if so, how did that affect his coaching? This is what he had to say about that.
Before I started playing, it was kind of like a bit like later before I started playing at 5, about 6 7, 8. I'm pretty sure. It might be a bit younger, but I did know about them when I joined with my new coach, and he knew and managed to make me feel welcome and all that. So it was, and he managed to make it so I can understand, when the coach and all that. So instead of doing it normally, I think he was more, if I didn't understand anything or look puzzled, would make sure he would explain it differently, you know what I mean, to make it so I could understand more, which was nice.
Yeah, and presumably when you do, I think you mentioned earlier, when you have very technical aspects, when you are getting a better golfer and you have to go from, from being just the very basic training to something more technical, that's something which you needed something a little bit different from even your, colleagues, friends at the same age.
Yeah, and I think that's when he's then progressed, if you know what I mean. So with the biomechanics and all that, like I said, and the coaching, he always tries to not just talk about it, but show me so I can actually visualize what's happening and see, you know what I mean.
Is it something which the coach had ever had to deal with before? Is that something he's had to learn from as well, learn from almost working with you?
Yeah, it's kind of like he's kind of going through, because he knows what it's like to go through the PGA way. So he's kind of helping because he wants to see other people go through that way and support as much as they can, if you know what I mean. And that's kind of the way he gives, helps.
And also, just finally as well, as far as becoming an England Golf Young Ambassador, how has that helped your golf as well? Has that made it easier or harder?
I don't think it's really changed it much. Honestly, I think that has helped a lot with the social media group and all that, being able to make posts and that, but it hasn't affected my golf, no.
So that's Daniel, who's mentioned there about becoming a young ambassador as well. But fascinated as well, the things that he's had to go through of choosing the coach and trying to find the right coach, and obviously with his dyslexia as well, issues which are so important as well to juniors, to make sure that they get the right coach, because it can make so much of a difference whether they progress or even whether they stay in the game.
Yeah, it's like a good teacher at school, isn't it? You always remember a good teacher, don't you? Be it golf, be it maths or geography or whatever it was. And it's a skill of a teacher as well, isn't it, to identify a way that somebody learns particularly well. Some people are visual learners, some people can like to read it, some people need it demonstrated. There's many different ways of doing it, and sometimes it's a bit of trial and error to figure it out, isn't it? But it seems like Daniel's had some good tuition along the way.
I mean, we've been fortunate on the podcast the last few weeks or so. We had Aaron Lansbury on, we've had Aaron Cox on previously, we had Phil obviously on a couple of weeks ago. Coaches whereby you can see the passion for the game, and you can see how children, juniors, boys, girls can relate to that. And that's important, isn't it, when you're looking for a coach, to try and find that person who just makes you fall in love with the game.
Yeah, golf's supposed to be fun, isn't it? Sport is supposed to be fun. It's also learning as well. But if you can make learning fun, then it's even better. We always talk about, at junior level, with this podcast about older juniors, but at the real younger level, like, I've got a 7-year-old. So when we go up the driving range, he just wants to see the ball in the air. It doesn't matter if it only goes 5 yards. He just wants to see it in the air. That's it. And he's happy. Then, of course, when you want to develop that, then there's different things around that. And that's when certain coaching comes in. But, a good coach is worth their weight in gold, just like so is a good teacher as well. And you can see when somebody has had that support, because not only do they enjoy the game, they're good at it as well. And they talk about their coach a lot as well. I mean, Paul, clearly from his interview earlier, which is fascinating, by the way, his old mentor, his old coach, bless him, was with him for 14 years, right from, being 16
to being a Ryder Cup player. I mean, fantastic.
Yeah, being from an old, he saw something, didn't he? He saw something in Paul and he got it right, and stuck with him, and they stuck together for a long time. So when you can find that right person who gets you and you get them, anything can happen.
Now, the reason why we started talking about this is because there is going to be let's take a slight twist with the podcast here. Obviously, when you're looking for a coach as well, and we did look at the younger juniors a couple of weeks ago and the older juniors now. This looking for a coach might involve a change of coach. Now, we spoke to Phil Akers last week about how he develops young golfers as well. Now, I raised the point with him, what happens when he loses golfers who he might well have coached from a very young age, and then they decide they're going to move on to another coach. This is what he had to say about it. It's fascinating, the fact that how a coach feels about when that can happen. This is what Phil had to say.
Massively massively disappointing from a coach's point of view to almost have to admit that other coaches have a better skill set within different areas of coaching, but it is just the way of things, you can't be the best at everything in it. Like, you might be the best developmental junior coach that there is, but that might not work for, say, Bryson DeChambeau. He might want that little bit extra sort of direction, a little bit more in-depth knowledge into biomechanics or stat tracking and stuff that maybe you just haven't spent all of your sort of education and work life sort of like evolving around, So it's something that you've got to be unselfish with. And, when as juniors and as professionals and that do sort of like develop along, actually, like, you're not always going to be the best coach for that player. And that is just the way of it, unfortunately. Like, you always want to be. It's a hard thing from an ego point of view to step aside and say, you know what, like, I've taken you as far as you possibly can do. And I'm always trying to evolve and learn and adapt, so I don't have to do that. But equally, like, there'll be specialists in putting, there'll be specialists in short game, there'll be specialists in biomechanics and fitness and health, like all of these things. And I think it's the case of a PGA professional is often has to be almost a bit of a jack of all trades. They need to be able to signpost in them areas. And I've had it a lot with sort of like juniors that I've developed through to say like England players and stuff like that. And then like big county players, then into England regionals, England national, where they'll end up getting this new team around them. And maybe they sort of move away. They might get scholarships over in the States, or they might get scholarships elsewhere, where you just don't get much time with that player anymore. And they get more opportunity to be coached off of a coach that's at their college or that's over in the States. And you know what? That's where sometimes you could almost have to sort of like stand aside, help, assist, let that player know like you're always there for them. Let them know that they can always confide in you. They almost want you to fact check and stuff like that. But equally, like, players need help and guidance and support and that. And if that's from a different country and you don't see that player for 7 or 8 months, it's tricky, because you're not seeing ball flights, you're not getting a lot of personal time with that player. And sometimes you do just need to step aside a little bit and try and signpost them towards coaches that you can recommend,
You've been there from the start, so you would hope that there's that loyalty in the sense if anything does go wrong, at least they can come back to where it was all, even if it's a case of just, they lose a bit of the enjoyment of the game. Just let's go back to the person who gave me fun golf right away from a very young age.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all you can do as a coach. It's easy to become. I'll tell you what, it's a very hard thing when a player leaves, because it can be almost an embarrassing thing for the player to have to say to the coach, look, I'm going to see someone else. And it can be a bit of a spiteful thing from a coach's point of view as well, where you're like, well, why aren't you going to see me anymore? I've invested all of this time and effort and that into you, like often going to see players at events that you're not paid for, taking days off and that, where it's like, oh, well, you got 16 years old and you're just dropping me. But unfortunately, like, that is the harsh reality of it. And I think after a while, you start to understand it, and you can only sort of, like, as you say, put your arm around them, say, look, I'm mega proud of all of the hard work and the achievements that we've sort of done, but I'm always going to be here for you as a sounding board if you want me to. But you've also got to be very selfish. If you want to become the very best player that you possibly can be, you've got to do the right thing for yourself, whether that's stay with your coach that you sort of have got on with and you've got this trust and player-coach cohesion, or even if it's the case that you've got to move away somewhere and, like you found someone else that's maybe going to help you more. Like, you've got to be selfish ultimately as a player to reach that. But it's a minefield, unfortunately. It's quite easy to take the wrong turn with that as well. I think it's quite a famous example of Tommy Fleetwood doing that a few years ago, where he went away from his boyhood coach, dropped way down the world rankings thing, went back to his boyhood coach and sort of like climbed back up. But I think he's just left him again now. And, it's like, sometimes it can work fantastically. Sometimes it might not. And unfortunately, that's the same with any player and player coach relationship.
That's fascinating, Phil, talking about it, and very philosophical about how, you know, it's difficult. He knows it's difficult when he loses a player, but it's just inevitable sometimes. The fact that you raise a player, same, you know, you brought up the subject of teachers. You know, at the end of the day, you have primary school teachers, you have secondary school teachers, you have university teachers. You know, they're the ones who get you through to the next stage, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But I think you'd like to think. I mean, he says it there where, you know, coaches could get spiteful. You'd like to think they wouldn't. You know, you really would. You'd like to think that at the end of the day, you know, would invest time in you, but they usually get paid as well. So that there is that too. So it's like, yes, but, you know, they've probably done quite well off you as well. So it's just one of those. Sometimes you just need a change, don't you? And it's not because it's not to insult the coach, not to say they're not good enough. It's just sometimes you just need a different setting. You just need a different atmosphere, a different environment. And sometimes it'll work and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you need to make that change and fail to work out where it does work and then end up going back, you know, like the Tommy Fleetwood scenario there. And it seems quite clear that Tommy Fleetwood feels his former coach could get him to a very, very good level, but perhaps he's just lacks that 1 or 2% that, you know, when you get to the elite level, 1 or 2% is the difference, isn't it, between victory and fourth. And it seems like this guy could get him to fourth, but he just needs to find that extra 1% from someone who can give him that. Same with, you know, Bryson DeChambeau completely transformed his game, didn't he?
Yeah,
pretty certain.
His body,
his body, exactly,
yeah.
Completely transformed it, and you know, so there you go. Don't take it personal. I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Now it's interesting. Just the last part of the interview with Daniel Robson, the England ambassador, because he has had to change coach for a different reason. This is the reason why. This is what he had to say.
One of those where I had to move, and I think the fact that I had like 3 choices to move, and I picked the right one because I think that one just stood out to me. You know what I mean? The way they just coached, that, you know, they were good because I just went into a lesson and it was like, wow, my swing just changed. So okay. So just go into a few more details of why you felt so comfortable in that environment. What did they do to make you feel, you know, that it was the right environment for you? Well, they knew what, you know, the move, and they knew they were new, so they were happy, they're smiling, you know, they introduced themselves, you know what I mean? And they just were happy for me to be there. They weren't like, you know what I mean, just wanting to get you done and dusted. They spent extra time with you if you needed it. So rather than doing like the full hour, for example, they'd probably go over a bit. And that's what just you made them like about them, because they want to help you improve. They're not just doing it for themselves, they're doing it to help others as well.
And obviously, in your instance, you mentioned the fact that it was a change which you had to make, not necessarily through choice. But do you think that actually was a benefit for you? Do you think that actually did help you in the long run?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think with my old coach as well, you could tell it got to the point where you became more of a fixer upper. So it just fix you up for the week, and then, you know what I mean, that's why he ended up retiring. So I think switching coach in the end was a good one. Move.
And we heard from Pro earlier saying about, but there's always that, obviously it's slightly different with yourself, but in those circumstances when you do change coach, sometimes at least you've got that option of going back to that coach, you know, just, you know, the person who started you out, if you like, whereby you can go back and almost fall back in love with the game if necessary. You know, you say that they've retired, but presumably they're still around. You could still go and speak to them if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, I've spoken to them already because they work in American golf now. So
yes, he actually works for them. So yeah, but fascinating here with obviously a change of coach and getting the right coach for the next step there. Now we've obviously spoke to juniors. We spoke to their angle of how they look at coaching. We spoke to professional at the top level about how he looked at junior coaching when he was growing up as well. Let's get it from a parent's point of view, and we're going to talk again to Paul Broadhurst, because of course his son has gone on to become a professional and also at a very good level as someone who's played on some of the tours which you've covered live. And his son Sam as well. And one, of course, that's Sam Broadhurst. So this is what Paul had to say about when he moved into professional ranks, when he started playing golf, and what he did during his younger years. So this is what Paul had to say.
He's hit a golf ball from about 7 or 8 years of age, but he was a good soccer player, good football player. He was on Coventry City books as a youngster till he was released at 12, 13, and any youngster when they get released, it's a big downer for them. So he started to get into the golf a bit more. He still played a little bit of football at a lower level, but he was not really, he'd lost the interest, and the golf took over. So he's been pretty keen from about 13 years of age.
And when did he start getting coaching then? And with your experience of not having coaching until you're a little older, how did you introduce him to coaching? Did you do it, for example?
Well, obviously at the start, yes, but I mean I'm no coach. I can coach a beginner, but I think that's the hard part, is to coach the scratch amateur and beyond. The tournament professionals. But at the time, 10 years ago, I started working with Tim Rouse, the pro at Northampton County Golf Club, and I'd known Tim for 30 odd years from way back, and I'd finished on tour, and I was just sort of treading water till I was 50. I met Tim at a Midlands region tournament, and I just won it actually, but we were talking over dinner and saying, I said, I've no idea how I won that. I'm just playing from memory really. There's no method there. And he invited me along to have a chat with him, and I'm still with him 10 years later. And through that I introduced him to Sam. So Sam still works with Tim. He's been with him for, I don't know, I guess 8 years or so. So he sees him on a fairly regular basis.
And what age was that when Sam started working with him?
I guess he would be 16, 17 maybe. Just before he went to college in the States for 4 years as an 18-year-old. So probably a year before that, about 17, I would say.
So what did Tim do with Sam? How did he?
I have no idea, to be honest.
Okay.
No, I mean, just iron out his faults basically. I mean, Sam was a good player at 17. He was probably off one or something like that, and he was playing for the junior team. But like any 17-year-old, they've all got their own faults, and to make that next step, they need to be ironed out. So Tim's been working on that for the best part of 7, 8, 9 years. Sam's still not quite made it yet. Still working hard at the game, and trying to make it, but there's a lot of good players out there, so he's got to keep working hard and take the chances when they come along.
Yeah, just one point on that. It's something which obviously you wouldn't have gone through, but there were junior coaches out there coaches who coach younger juniors, and then when they get to perhaps 15, 16, 17, and they want to take that next step up, they move coach, and that could be quite, from a coach's point of view, it can be demoralising, the fact that they've had someone from such a young age. Obviously you didn't go through that, but Sam obviously did a little bit, because he had coaching him until moving to Tim. Was that a difficult decision for him to make, to change coach?
I mean, Sam had Warwickshire coaching. Andy Dunbar, a good friend of mine, I think he was at Stratford Oaks, Andy. He was doing the junior team at the time, and I think when they started, he'd just started working with Tim. So Andy had have a little bit of input at the county coaching sessions, but he was well aware of what Tim was doing as well. So it seemed to work well. We didn't want Sam to not go to the county coaching, but Andy needed to be aware that Tim was his proper coach as such. But it worked out okay. It wasn't a conflict of interest or anything like that.
Yeah. But you can say, obviously, as a professional golfer, that can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
changing coaches can be a good thing, particularly at that age.
I've had loads of coaches over there. I've had some of the best coaches in the world, and and they're not necessarily the best coaches, for certain individuals. I go back to working with Tim. I mean, I worked with, like I said, a lot of the top coaches out on tour, but not one of them spotted that my head position at address was in the wrong area. And that was the main reason I was whipping it inside in the backswing and could never keep the club out in front of me. And all Tim did was just change the way I looked at the ball, change my eye line basically. And I just thought, wow, why didn't somebody tell me this 20 years ago? It just, because I drive the ball so much better now. I don't swing it as far now because I'm getting old, but my driving's improved unbelievably just by moving my eye line slightly. And now I still have a tendency to get the club behind me, but it's not as behind, and I can manage it. But just a simple thing like that, really, just right, you're looking at it wrong, let's move your eye line. So I just wish perhaps I'd started working with Tim 20 years earlier, but
yeah. That's a fascinating story there again. I mean, you raised the point there about the minute details there, and that's someone who spotted something after 20 years of playing the game at the very highest level. I wish he'd gone back 20 years. That's the difference a coach can make.
Could have been interviewing a 5-time Masters winner instead. Who knows? Although he did it right, Paul, didn't he? He had a good career.
Yeah, but it's so important, isn't it? And from a parent's point of view, by the looks of it, he didn't get too interfering with his son and trying to dictate who your coaches were, and got the county coaching and made sure that didn't interfere with his normal coach. Very clever way of looking after a junior golfer, someone who should know, because obviously he's been through that himself.
Yeah, I think very down to earth actually, and as I said before, we were filming Sam's tournament he won at Chart Hills last year on the Mizuno Next Gen Series Clutch Pro Tour. And spoke to him at the 18th green, Sam, and just very down to earth. Didn't mention his dad at all or anything. It was actually Tom Hayward from the tour. He's like, Paul Broadhurst's son's playing. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, great. But it sounds like Paul is letting him find his own way, if you know what I mean, and very open and very honest. And he is a very good golfer, is Sam. But there's a lot of very good golfers at that level, that sort of Clutch Pro Tour, 2020 Pro Tour level, trying to make it PGA Euro Pro Tour level. It's all sort of the same sort of level. And there's a lot of them, and there's 100 players in each field, and they're not all going to make it. And you look at them and you think, well, how are they not going to make it? Because they're all brilliant golfers. But that is then when you find a coach who can just unlock that little something extra from you, because every golf coach should be able to teach you how to hit a ball and hit a ball well. And they should be able to teach you training drills and how to read a putt and do things like that. But it's a coach bond connect with who can then just take you that little bit further from here to here. But, to go from 20 handicap to 10 handicap, should be every coach should be able to do that with people, really. But to get from 10 down to 3, let's say, gets very difficult, and you have to find those finer margins at that level. And then to get from 3 to scratch and pro, I mean, that's when you've got to be a really good coach. Not just a really good coach, you've got to have bond with that person as well, not just on a personal level, as friends and things like that, but a level of respect and professionalism. You need to be able to identify how that player operates on the course, off the course as well, and that's where the greats come in to it.
Let's hear finally then. This is the last bit. Let's hear Paul Broadhurst. What would his advice be to a junior golfer or a parent of a junior golfer if they're looking for a coach? This is what he had to say.
I guess somebody that's coached, to a certain level in the past. Maybe he's coached county players and stuff like that. But it's difficult to say who the best coaches are. You've got to find one that you trust. Certainly 15, 16 is not too late to start having coaching. I would say as a beginner, go and see your PGA pro and get all the basics right to start with. Don't go up the range with your dad and let your dad sort your golf swing out first time out, because that's when bad habits come in. You see a lot of youngsters up the driving range with funny grips and just stand there wrong, and over the years that's not going to improve. So I'd certainly say go and see a PGA pro and get the basics right for any youngster, and then take it from there, really.
He's so right. He's so right when he says that, because that's what happened to me, basically. Like I said at the start of this podcast, basically my old man took me up and taught me how to set up and things, but he was good.
And your old man's not Paul Broadhurst, is he? But at least you'd hope that you get some half decent advice from Paul Broadhurst.
No, but even just when you're starting, just go see your PGA pro, because they're good. They are good. I mean, I've had lessons and stuff from PGA pros, and they'll get you to a decent level, you know. And for me, you know, I'm 37, you know, I knew I was never going to make it ever. And I'm sort of okay with that, but having a refresher lesson from a PGA pro at a club is good enough for me, because I'm quite happy, you know, if I can get, you know, if I can go around in a solid score, I'm quite happy. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not looking to rip up trees, but get the basics right, as he says, go see a PGA pro, and then if it turns out you've got a bit of a talent for this, then you do need to perhaps start looking at more of a specialist coach.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously done a two-parter on junior golf coaching, and we've kind of split it up between under 12 and 12 and up. But actually, it just comes down to, you know, you could be 12 years old when you very start, but obviously it's more down to beginner coaching, getting those basics, and then when you, like you say there, if you want to go on to become a better player, then have a look at possibly specialising coaching. You know, and that's not to just, you know, say that your original coach, you know, can't do that. You know, it just means that you might have to do a bit more one-on-one coaching. You might need to just look at different areas and learn from it. That's the whole point of the podcast over the last couple of podcasts, is to try and get different angles and different viewpoints. Obviously, we had a completely different viewpoint from Daniel, obviously, as a young ambassador, junior point of view of the things that he's had to deal with, you know, as someone who was, you know, for many years was quite a high handicapper, you know, eventually got himself down to a 2 handicap, and obviously had his dyslexia as well, which obviously, you know, he had to deal with, and obviously his coach had to deal with as well. So very different aspects of looking at the coaching, and I hope you've enjoyed that. We've tried to cover lots of different aspects of the junior coaching. Just to mention as well, the next podcast, which will be coming up in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be doing ones on rules of golf, because that's one whereby we're going to try and make it fun. We're not going to be too serious about it. It's
going to be a 16-hour long podcast as well.
Absolutely, yes, that's it. Yeah, we'll get the book. We're going to read it out page by page.
He's hit a golf.
Oh, sorry, that was me. I knocked the video.
Paul Broadhurst, Paul
Broadhurst saying no.
That's it. Yes, no rules. No, like you say. I mean, there was some rules infringements or whatever in the US Masters, or possible rules infringements. But anyway, there you go. So yes, so we're going to be covering that in the next podcast. We're going to be covering lots of different subjects over the coming weeks. Ian mentioned right the way from the start, if you've got any recommendations for what kind of podcasts which we'd like to cover, subjects which you think we should be covering junior golf, then by all means get in touch, because we'd love to, you know, to touch upon certain things. I mean, we've already probably got a list of about 10, 12, which we're going to be doing over the next few weeks or so. But I think the list is endless. But that was all about junior coaching today. So thanks very much for joining us. Thanks so much, Ian. Thanks very much for Paul Broadhurst. Thanks very much for Phil Akers. And thanks so much for England Young Ambassador Daniel Robson. And we shall see you in a couple of weeks' time. Good evening.
Okay, everybody. Bye-bye.